Level 1. Serious. You are 22, soaked through, and $14 away from sleeping outside. Rainwater runs from your sleeves onto the marble floor of the Beaumont Hotel. A brass clock above reception says 11:43 p.m. The lobby smells like coffee, polished wood, and money. The clerk asks for your reservation. There is none. You could turn around before security notices your shoes. Instead, you place your dead phone on the counter and say the booking was made by your employer. You keep the story simple. Delayed train, missing confirmation, important meeting at 8. The clerk searches again. Nothing. A manager begins walking toward you. You have one decision left. Admit the truth and lose the room, or give the clerk a reason to want the lie to be true. You glance at the hospital wristband still stuck inside your coat pocket from visiting your mother that morning. You place it beside the phone and lower your voice. You just need somewhere close to the hospital for one night. The clerk stops looking at the screen. 10 minutes later, a white key card rests in your palm. Room 814. No charge. Upstairs, the shower is hot. A covered plate arrives with a handwritten note wishing your mother well. For one night, nobody asks what you earn or why your card might be declined. The first lie does not feel like power. It feels like relief. In the morning, the clerk asks whether your mother is better. The honest answer rises, then disappears. You thank her and walk toward the revolving door. A woman in a gray coat is waiting beside the lobby bar. She introduces herself as Mara Quinn and repeats your entire story back to you, including the parts you invented. Your stomach drops. She does not call security. She asks why you used the wristband instead of anger, status, or threats. You tell her the clerk wanted to help someone more than she wanted to enforce a policy. Mara smiles and slides $300 across the bar. You can refuse and call last night an accident. Or you can learn why the lie worked. You take the money. The Beaumont keycard goes into your wallet. It is the first object your new life gives you, and the last honest reminder of why you entered it. Level 2. You are still 22 when Mara begins your education. She does not begin with expensive suits or dramatic schemes. She begins with breakfast. Every morning, you sit in a different diner and predict what strangers will order before the server reaches their table. Not from their clothes alone, from the way they hold the menu, whether they ask about prices, who speaks first, and who waits to be given permission. At stations, you spot the person terrified of missing a connection. At hotel bars, you spot the person desperate to seem important. Most people reveal what they want within a minute. On your first morning, you spot a businessman sitting alone and start to rise. Mara tells you to wait. You can chase the obvious story or trust the lesson. You sit back. A minute later, his wife and children arrive. The lonely man you were ready to invent never existed. Your job is to listen before offering anything. The early wins are small: a free meal, a better room, a borrowed jacket from a man who enjoys feeling richer than you. For the first time, the world feels readable. Then Mara brings you to a music venue where 3 young performers have spent 2 weeks asking a promoter for money he owes them. The promoter is loud, connected, and certain nobody in the room can embarrass him. Mara gives you a choice. You can take an easy target outside, someone distracted and trusting, and finish the night with quick cash. Or you can approach the promoter, whose money is harder to reach but easier to justify taking. You choose the promoter. You offer no detailed proposal. You simply let him believe you can introduce him to a private room full of investors and celebrities. You let him talk. You correct him once. You leave twice before he finishes speaking. By midnight, he is chasing your attention. By 2 in the morning, the performers have been paid because the promoter suddenly wants the room to see him as generous. He also gives you $4,000 to reserve a place at an event that does not exist. Outside, Mara divides the money under the red glow of the venue sign. She gives you half. You give 1 bundle to the performers. It does not make you honest, but it lets you believe the climb still has rules. Within a month, your rent is paid, your refrigerator is full, and people who once looked through you return your calls. The money could keep you working small rooms forever. Instead, you spend part of it on one good suit and ask Mara to take you somewhere people remember names. Because the greatest reward is not the money. It is the moment before someone agrees, when their face changes, and you know the version of reality inside their head now belongs partly to you. One night, a man you fooled recognizes Mara in a crowded restaurant. You can leave through the kitchen. Instead, you step beside her, greet him confidently by the wrong name, and ask whether his wife enjoyed Paris. He has never been to Paris, but everyone turns toward him. Correcting you would mean admitting he does not belong, so he laughs and retreats into his own confusion. In the taxi, Mara gives you a new name, Julian Reed. Your real name can get a table near the kitchen. Julian Reed gets invited upstairs. Level 3. By 23, you own one rented tuxedo, 2 convincing business cards, and a watch that must be returned by noon. All of them belong to Julian Reed. Yet on Friday night, you enter a museum gala as though one of the buildings carries your family name. A grifter takes from the world in front of him. An imposter enters worlds that were never supposed to open. You learn that the person with the most power often uses the fewest words. You stop filling silence or explaining why you belong. Mara adjusts your cuff before the gala doors open. The borrowed invitation is enough to enjoy the room and leave clean. Then the museum chairman passes with a black envelope inside his jacket. Mara tells you not to reach beyond the identity you built. You watch the envelope disappear through the doors and follow it. Your goal is no longer a wallet. It is the private weekend inside that envelope, where powerful people meet without assistants or cameras. Inside, every detail tests you. The placement of your glass, the names you should know, the pause after an unfamiliar company. You make one mistake in the first 10 minutes and call a donor by her sister's name. You can cover it with another lie. Instead, you apologize briefly and ask about the foundation she built after her father died. The honest recovery makes the performance feel real. An hour later, she introduces you to the chairman. He asks which family office you represent. Mara touches her earring from across the room. It means leave. Walking away protects the identity. Staying could expose everything. You look past the chairman toward the black invitation. Then you say that people who need to announce whom they represent usually do not represent anyone important. The silence lasts long enough for your rented shoes to feel very cheap. The chairman laughs. Not because the answer proves anything, because it gives him permission to feel like an insider beside you. He places the invitation in your hand. 3 days later, you step onto a private jet with 6 people who assume someone else verified you. A driver waits at the other end. Your room overlooks the ocean. Your phone fills with numbers that would never have answered your real name. The dream is no longer a warm bed for one night. It is access. At breakfast, Mara calls you by your real name. You correct her without thinking. She studies you, then says, Julian. For the first time, the borrowed name feels less like a tool and more like the person receiving all the rewards. Level 4. You are 24 when you meet Marcus Dane at the private weekend hidden inside the black envelope. At the lower levels, the lie needs only a few minutes to survive. Now it must survive breakfast, weekends, arguments, and silence. Marcus is a property developer with a talent for turning broken promises into luxury towers. He is wealthy, careful, and lonely enough to believe those qualities make him impossible to fool. You do not ask for money. For 3 months, you become useful. You remember which newspaper he hates. You send him a restaurant reservation before he asks. You introduce him to 2 real people and refuse 3 opportunities to benefit from him. At the end of the first month, Marcus offers you a large commission for one of those introductions. Taking it would solve every immediate problem, but it would also tell him your usefulness has a price. You slide the contract back unsigned and make the introduction anyway. The refusal costs you money. It buys something larger. Marcus begins calling when he has no deal to discuss. Your cheap apartment becomes a bright corner unit with a doorman. Assistants now call you first. The performance is no longer something you put on. It is the structure of your week. Marcus eventually invites you to his coastal house. During a storm, the electricity fails, and the two of you sit between candles while rain strikes the glass. He admits his son speaks to him only through lawyers. Then he asks whether anyone would stay beside you if the money vanished. Mara is asleep in the next room. You can answer honestly and end the most dangerous part of the performance. Instead, you tell Marcus exactly enough truth to make the lie breathe. You describe being broke, ignored, and tired of asking permission to enter rooms. Marcus recognizes the hunger. The next morning, he offers you control of a private investment account. You could take little, walk away, or complete the life you have been building since the Beaumont. You take the account. Days later, the money is gone. So are you and Mara. The payoff buys a permanent apartment, clothes you do not return, and enough cash to stop measuring meals or rent. For several weeks, the victory feels clean. Then Marcus calls the private number only 3 people possess. He does not threaten you. He asks whether any part of the friendship was real. Mara waits for your answer. You end the call. Over the next week, all 6 people Marcus introduced keep answering your calls. He has warned none of them. Admitting the truth would mean admitting that the careful man was fooled by someone he called a friend. His silence protects you. It also leaves 6 doors open. That choice buys safety, but it leaves the first crack inside Julian Reed and creates the opportunity for your next level. Level 5. At 25, you learn that one person can be careful. A whole social circle cannot. Marcus's silence leaves 6 introductions that still believe Julian Reed is his trusted friend. One leads to Celia Ward, founder of a luxury travel company preparing to open a private coastal retreat. Celia checks every name and every person at the table. Approaching her directly would turn you into a question she can investigate. So you choose a slower entrance. At a dinner hosted by one of Marcus's contacts, you ask not to be introduced to Celia. You speak to everyone around her, then leave before dessert. Before you reach home, the host calls. Celia asked about you after you left. Over 4 months, Julian develops history. The same driver collects you. A bartender remembers your drink. Real investors attend your dinners because Marcus once vouched for you. Mara keeps the history consistent. At the second dinner, an investor asks to bring his lawyer next time. Refusing looks like fear. Allowing him inside risks everything. You tell him to bring the lawyer, then seat him beside a real architect who has worked with Celia for years. You ask neither man to lie. Each answers only what is true. The lawyer leaves with no single false statement to attack. Julian no longer looks verified. He looks surrounded by verified people. Celia's assistant finally calls with an invitation to the unfinished retreat and asks whether Marcus will attend. You can delay until you control the question, or accept before Celia loses interest. You say Marcus is unavailable and accept. Concrete rooms face the sea. Plastic sheets snap against open windows while workers carry tiles through corridors that should already be finished. Celia's opening has stalled after a partner withdrew. She walks you through the empty dining hall and offers Julian a legitimate partnership. Real salary, real equity, a real office with his name on the door. You ask for one night to decide. Mara places 2 folders on the dining table. One contains the partnership contract, the other contains the final documents for the con. Celia is prepared to move the remaining project funds once Julian's investor group confirms its participation. Mara says the legitimate life is imperfect, but it is a door that does not require another victim. You leave both folders closed until sunrise. Then you push the partnership contract back and open the other one. You choose the larger payoff. At the launch lunch, 12 guests arrive in cars Celia recognizes. The bartender greets you. 2 real investors shake your hand because each assumes the others have already committed. A tablet rests beside Celia's plate with the transfer waiting. Before she signs, one guest asks why the group has issued no public announcement. Every conversation stops. You can retreat and preserve the identity or test 4 months of trust in public. You stand, remove your own commitment page, and say private money becomes public only after people who need attention have finished taking credit for it. Then you sign first. The risk everyone sees belongs to Julian Reed. Celia laughs with the others and signs. The tablet displays confirmation. Outside, workers continue building a retreat whose money is already leaving it. Back at the apartment, Mara places 2 passports on the table. The next identity and your real name. She says she is tired of waking beside a man who changes according to the room. You promise this was the final large job. The doorbell rings before she answers. An ivory envelope waits outside from Elias Voss, one of the most powerful financiers in the city. He knows Julian Reed does not exist. Inside is only a time and an address. Mara tears it in half. You tape it back together. Level 6. You are 26 when you finally walk into Elias Voss's office. He does not hire you to steal an account or an invitation. He hires you to make uncertain people behave as though the future has already been decided. Your office occupies a nameless top floor above the financial district. Executives study your face before deciding whether they should feel confident. Now reputation itself becomes the con. The lifestyle is everything the 22-year-old in the Beaumont imagined. Private rooms, flights that wait, and a penthouse above the city. On your second week, a junior analyst named Felix finds the same 800 passengers counted twice in a launch presentation. He enters, expecting to be fired. You can remove the person who noticed the weakness, or learn how much else he can see. You close the door and ask him to continue. Felix marks every dependency the presentation tries to hide. He is nervous, precise, and hungry enough to study until the city wakes. You bring him into the next operation. That choice makes him loyal long before either of you understands what loyalty will cost. Voss's largest test begins before sunrise at an unfinished ferry terminal. The harbor smells of salt, wet steel, and hot electrical cable. Wind pushes paper cups along the empty platform, while a digital departure board displays a route that does not exist yet. The city will approve the route only after a vessel completes a public safety test. The manufacturer will release the vessel only after the bank releases the final payment. The bank will release the money only after the company proves real demand. The presentation solves the circle with false passenger numbers. Voss tells you nobody will examine them if the first institution moves quickly enough. Using the figures would create momentum in one sentence. Correcting them could stop the entire project. Felix waits beside the silent departure board. You ask him what remains true. 800 passengers do not exist, but 2 waterfront hotels need a reliable airport connection. Hundreds of commuters joined a waiting list without paying. The crew union will staff 1 test day if wages are guaranteed. The manufacturer has 1 demonstration vessel nearby. The city wants fewer cars crossing the bridge. None of those facts is enough alone. Together, they might become a morning. At 4:40 a.m., you move the launch contingency fund into refundable escrow to guarantee the crew and the vessel. Voss gave you authority to deploy it, not to expose all of it before the first permit. If the chain fails, the loss will carry your name. At 5, the 2 hotels sign conditional transport agreements. They owe nothing unless the route opens. At 6, the union crew enters through the service gate because the wages are already protected. At 7, the city inspector grants a 1-day test permit because a trained crew and insured vessel now exist. The manufacturer releases the demonstration ferry because the permit exists. You invite every person on the waiting list to ride free. By 9, the empty platform is crowded with commuters, hotel staff, journalists, and families who came because the crossing costs nothing and because movement attracts witnesses. You do not tell the journalists the rides are free. You do not tell the bank that the hotel deposits can still be withdrawn if the route fails. Every fact is real. The picture they form is not. Ruth Calder, Voss's oldest capital partner, arrives as the ferry powers on. She asks whether the demand figures in the presentation are accurate. You can defend the numbers and preserve the appearance of certainty. Instead, you hand her Felix's correction. You tell her the permanent route is not proven. Today is. The ferry pulls away from the platform. The crowd becomes smaller behind it. The city skyline moves across the windows. For 20 minutes, Nobody in the chain is waiting for somebody else to act. When the vessel returns, the hotels convert their conditional agreements into deposits. The bank releases the first payment because the route is operating, the hotels have committed money, and public demand now appears visible. The manufacturer unlocks the second vessel. By noon, a project held together by anticipation has begun creating facts of its own. Voss sends one message: you can make the future arrive early. The reward is a larger office, a percentage of the project, and authority to build your own team. You choose Felix first. Mara sees why the power is addictive. She also sees what Voss intends to do with it. She leaves a tablet on the kitchen counter. Workers are carrying boxes from a company your previous campaign kept alive in public and closed in reality. Voss turns human expectation into machinery. When it stops, people you never meet pay the price. That night, Mara has packed a suitcase. She asks you to leave before Voss makes Julian more valuable than the person underneath. Leaving means surrendering the first life in which cities, companies, and powerful people wait for your answer. Staying means losing the only person who knew you before they did. You walk to the window instead of the door. Mara takes the passport with your real name. Julian Reed keeps everything else. Level 7. By 29, you rarely meet the people being convinced. Your nights smell of printer toner and cold coffee, while other people perform the worlds you designed. A Rainmaker controls momentum across institutions. An architect controls everything people see before they enter the decision. You now manage actors, lawyers, drivers, rented offices, real companies, and carefully limited truths. You design the world in which disbelief feels unreasonable. Felix builds the timelines. The nervous analyst now carries 2 phones and corrects senior lawyers without apologizing. When one lawyer refuses to follow Felix's sequence, you can protect the senior man or protect the system you built. You remove the lawyer from the operation and give Felix final authority over the timeline. Felix still looks at you the way you once looked at Mara. The reward is control. Problems disappear before reaching you. Teams wait for your decisions. During a Voss operation, Felix discovers 6 sealed agreements under different company names. Each promises a different senior partner protection if the network is exposed. All 6 cannot be true. Felix brings them to your office after midnight and asks whether he should copy them. Keeping the evidence creates an exit. Returning it protects your position. You tell him to return the folders untouched. 2 days later, investigators stop Felix outside a company office. The ordinary files in his bag connect the visible business to one of Voss's hidden companies. Voss orders every record erased. 2 phones sit on your desk. One call activates lawyers and exposes part of the network. The other protects the structure by leaving Felix alone. At level 2, Mara held your exit. Felix believes you are holding his. You call the team that protects the structure. By morning, every record says Felix acted alone. Voss rewards you with $7 million and control of a larger division. The gain is real. So is the silence in the penthouse. Mara appears that night. Felix called her before his arrest. She asks whether you abandoned him. You explain the scale, the risk, and the people who would fall if you made the other call. She places the Beaumont key card and a storage key on the table. Felix disobeyed one instruction. Before returning the agreements, he photographed every signature and sent the images to Mara. You can destroy the key, warned Voss, and keep the reward. Instead, you take it. Inside the storage box are 6 photographs. Every partner was promised safety. Every partner was blamed in somebody else's version. 6 weeks later, investigators raid 3 Voss offices. Accounts freeze, assistants vanish. People who once answered immediately forget your name. Voss calls before you finish packing. He can protect Julian Reed if you make Mara responsible for the network. A contract, a new passport, and $10 million will wait in his penthouse office. You tell him you will sign. Ending the call would let you run. Instead, you open the floor plans Felix built for Voss's private meetings. Every senior partner already has service lift access. At 5:40, after Voss dismisses his staff, that lift opens into the boardroom beside his office. You send 6 messages. Each contains a page from another partner's agreement, the time, and the same sentence. Voss has chosen who falls. Come hear him say it. Ruth replies first. The others follow because none can risk being the only partner absent. For the first time, your architecture is not designed to make a lie survive. It is designed to make hidden truths enter the same room. Level 8. At 29, the highest level does not begin with more money. It begins when money is no longer the hardest thing to refuse. At 5:40, your phone vibrates once. The 6 partners are inside the adjoining boardroom. Their access came from the system you built. The closed door between them and Voss is the same door you designed to keep private conversations private. Voss enters at 6. A contract waits beside a new passport and $10 million. It says Mara designed the network. One signature gives you a clean identity, a private plane, and another life without questions. Voss asks whether you came alone. You can expose the room before he speaks or commit to the performance. You say yes, and place your phone on the table. Every level taught you what people need to believe. Voss needs to believe nobody can deceive him. You let your shoulders fall, ask how quickly the plane can leave, and read the contract twice. Then you ask why he selected Felix. Voss answers carefully. You look frightened. He answers more. Felix was always intended to take the blame. Mara never contacted investigators. Voss created the threat and the rescue. Confession feels like victory when the listener appears defeated. You ask which partner he plans to sacrifice first. He names Ruth Calder. A chair moves behind the adjoining door. Voss hears it. You can sign before the room opens and preserve the exit he promised. Instead, you place the pen beside the contract. The door opens. Ruth enters carrying the agreement that promised her protection. 5 others follow with different versions of the same promise. You do not defeat Voss with a larger lie. You let his smaller lies meet one another. He orders the partners to sit. Nobody does. Phones ring, lawyers leave, accounts move. The woman controlling the private planes cancels your aircraft and walks out. By sunrise, Voss is still wealthy. He simply no longer controls the room. The passport remains beside your hand. You could take it while everyone is looking at him. Your fingers touch the cover, then stop. It offers what room 814 once offered, relief purchased through another name. You leave it on the table. Later that morning, you carry the agreements, Felix's photographs, and your own records into an interview room. You hand the evidence to investigators. The choice does not make you innocent. It makes the final decision yours. Your cooperation proves Felix tried to preserve evidence rather than build the network alone. He receives legal help. Mara is cleared. You still face prison, but the sentence becomes shorter than the life Julian Reed had already built around you. Neither Felix nor Mara asks you back into the life they build afterward. 5 years later, at 34, you enter a modest hotel carrying one bag. The clerk asks for your reservation and your name. 7 answers rise automatically. You give him your own. He slides a white keycard across the desk. The room is smaller than 814. On the bedside table, you place the old Beaumont card beside the new one. The first room proved you could become anyone. This one proves you no longer have to. The lie gave you comfort, money, access, and mastery. Those rewards were real. What it never gave you was belonging without performing. You pick up the new keycard. For the first time, the person entering the room and the person named on the reservation are the same.